Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Ben Dunson and I teach New Testament and Greek at RTS Dallas and also at RTS Houston. The purpose of this screenshot video is to go over the syllabus with you for Greek Exegesis, which will be taking place from June 11th to June 14th on the Houston campus. I'm going to go over the syllabus and I'm going to go over the assignments as well. It is extremely important that you listen to this entire video. And in fact, I'll treat this as the first hour or so of our class. And so that'll mean that however long this video goes, we will not meet for that length of time during our week together. The reason this video is so important is because I'm going to go over the translation of Philippians, which is due on the first day of our class together. And that's going to be the basis for this class, is that you have translated Philippians and that we will then go into great detail in discussing Philippians in our time together. So please make sure you listen to this whole video as all of the different aspects of the class and the assignment will be discussed in this video. All right, well, as you can see in the screenshot, I've got the dates here, so we'll start with that. Dates are June 11th to June 14th, which is a Tuesday to a Friday. You can see we meet on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at different times, so make sure that you're aware of when those different times are. And you'll get a copy of this syllabus if you haven't already, and it will be posted on Canvas as well. Okay, well, here's how you can contact me. I mean, the best way to contact me is by email. I've got an office phone, but especially over the summer, I won't be in my office as much. So if you need to get in touch with me, please feel free to email me at bdunson@rts.edu. And of course, if there's an issue that we can't cover in email, I'm happy to talk to you on the phone. We can just set up a time to do that by email. What is this class? Well, this class is meant to help you get in depth into translating the Greek of the New Testament and to give you skills for a lifetime of ministry and a lifetime of using your Greek in ministry. And so we'll be focusing on grammar and syntax, but going into more depth and more detail than in the William Mounce textbook that is the basis of Greek 1 and 2. We'll be using what's called an intermediate Greek grammar, which introduces us to much more advanced semantic and linguistic concepts. For instance, just a genitive. You know what a genitive is from Mounce. But you'll find in our textbook that a genitive can be used in quite a few ways, and so we need to be able to say in any given text when we're doing preparation for a sermon or preparation for a talk or whatever it is, how is this genitive being used? Now, it's not always that difficult to figure it out, and so sometimes it's not really that much of a struggle. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, and so the purpose of this class is to give us those categories for being able to do that. So we'll be focusing on syntax and semantics of New Testament Greek. Semantics is word meaning. Syntax is sentence structure, and sometimes people would advance that beyond sentence structure to talking about paragraphs and even sometimes larger units, even a whole writing. Although usually when you get into those bigger levels, people call that discourse analysis. And you see that's the second point of the class. Now we'll get into discourse analysis in the Young textbook that you'll see below. And I'm also going to have you watch a series of videos by Dr. Ben Glad, who teaches New Testament at RTS Jackson, to introduce the concepts of discourse analysis in more depth. And then finally, we will, towards the end of our time in the week together, we will discuss and introduce New Testament textual criticism. Textual criticism is the study of differences that you see in the different manuscripts of the New Testament. And this could be something from as small as a scrap of ancient paper, which we call papyrus, where there's just a fragment of a New Testament text, all the way to elaborate, illuminated medieval manuscripts of a text, and all the way to modern critical editions of the New Testament, such as the versions that you'll be using for the class. Above all, this class is hopefully going to give you a foundation to build upon for a lifetime of using Greek in ministry in the future. And I emphasize that because you're not going to learn everything you need to know in this class. And you're not going to be an expert in Greek at the end of just simply 3 semesters of Greek. But you will have, I hope, the tools to keep learning and to keep going forward, and above all, to using Greek. And so my goal here is not to make you Greek scholars so much as my goal is to give you the tools to use Greek in ministry. Okay, well, attendance is obviously required. It's all the more important when we're only meeting during 4 different days. If you miss any of that, then you've missed weeks worth in a normal semester. I say bring a Bible to each class. Now this is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a Greek Bible that you'll be bringing to this class. I do not allow laptops. I've got a lengthy reason for that. I'm not going to read that, but I don't allow laptops or iPads or iPhones to be used during the class, and I'm very strict about that. They're very distracting for everyone. And especially with language, you don't need them at all, because you're not primarily going to be taking notes. You're primarily going to be trying to think through translations. So just make sure you don't have a laptop open, or that you're using your iPad or your iPhone or your phone during class. It's always very obvious, so just please don't do that. Okay, well, so assigned readings. This is very important. After I read these, I'm going to show you these on Amazon just so you make sure you get the right thing. You see this note here. On the first day of class, you'll be required to indicate the percentage read. That applies to the Richard Young book and the Stanley Porter book, and then this chapter on Philippians here. Does not apply to D.A. Carson exegetical fallacies. That one you'll need to tell me on the final exam how much of it you've read. So we could even modify this to indicate the percentage read of the Young and Porter Pitts text and the Philippians chapter in Carson and Moo. Okay, so that's going to be a significant portion of your grade. People sometimes don't realize how much that affects their grade. So please do make sure you have read before we start our class. Number 4, the Richard Young Intermediate New Testament Greek. Number 5, Stanley Porter and Andrew Pitt's Fundamentals of New Testament Textual Criticism. And number 7, the chapter on Philippians in D.A. Carson and Douglas Moo, an Introduction to the New Testament. All right, so what textbooks do you need for this class? There's 2 Greek texts here, and I'm putting this under required, although I'll be somewhat flexible. The Reader's New Testament is, the Reader's edition here is, I'm going to show you on Amazon which one it is. It is this one here, and so it says a Reader's edition, the Greek New Testament. What this is I'm going to come back to this, but it looks like this. Okay, so it has the same Greek text as the little blue version of the New Testament. That's number 2 on the list of textbooks. But the difference is down here, it doesn't have information about the different possible manuscript variations, but rather it has information about certain vocabulary words in the text. So let's look at the first one here. Anapesein. Okay, so what is anapesein? Well, there's a little footnote, footnote 1, that would send you down here, and it gives you the lexical form anapipto, and it tells you that it's an aorist active infinitive, and then it gives you an English gloss, which is sit. Okay, and it does that for every single word in the New Testament that is used 30 times or less. 30 times or less. Now, in Greek 1 and 2, you should have learned using this textbook, The Basics of Biblical Greek by William Mounts. You should have learned every word that is in the New Testament that is used 30 times or more. Okay, and so if you haven't learned that, then you're going to need to catch up on that. If you've forgotten any of that, please start studying now, because I'm going to test you on that, and that'll be very significant. So all of the vocab in William Mounts at the end of each of his chapters is required for this class, and perhaps even we could go in here and see if he has see if we can find a specific chapter where we could show how this works. So chapter 10, you work through all the material in chapter 10, and we get to the end of chapter 10, and of course it's omitted from that one. So let's try chapter 11. Working through chapter 11, material in chapter 11. Okay, here we go. Well, it doesn't give us everything because it's omitted some pages, but it's like this. So the page in front of this one, so I guess page 96, starts the vocab, and then on page 97 here we've got the rest of the vocab for chapter 11. So these are words that are used 30 times or more in the New Testament. And so you have to have those memorized for this class. If you have memorized those words, then you will be able to use this version of the New Testament, and you'll be able to read everything in Philippians without having to look the words up in a dictionary. Okay, so by just using these glosses, these are the words that are used 30 times or less in the New Testament. And every time you encounter one, like this one, anapesein or kortos, footnote 2, then you go down here, kortos is a noun, and it is, the gloss is, it means grass. Okay, so this is a really useful tool for sermon prep and for just personal Bible reading, because I would say you will be much better off if you can memorize all the way down as far as you can go. Some seminaries require all the way down to 10 times, words that are used at least 10 times in the New Testament. That's a lot harder to do, but it's certainly beneficial, and so I would highly recommend that. But for this class, I'm only going to require the words from Mounts, and that's 30 times or more. But if you have those memorized, then you can read the Greek New Testament simply with this reader's edition. You don't have to have any other tool to have access to every single word in the New Testament. So it's very useful in that sense. And I'll explain this in a second. It's also going to be necessary for you to at least have access to a copy of this for your translation homework for this class. Okay, so that's the first book, the Greek New Testament, the text of UBS 5. And it looks like this. There are paperback versions and there are hardback versions, and I'm not particular on that. I think the hardbacks are really nice, and they definitely hold up a lot better. The paperback's not particularly high quality. So you're going to at least have to have access to this. Okay, so the next text on our list is the Nestle Aland 28th Revised Edition of the Greek New Testament with Revised Greek English Dictionary. Okay, so that is this book, and it's a smaller book, and this version of the Greek New Testament is the one that has all of, well, not all of them, but has many of the important variations in the manuscript. And you'll see a big apparatus underneath the Greek text with all sorts of crazy symbols and numbers that will probably terrify you at first, and you'll have no idea what that is. Towards the end of our class, I'm going to explain all of that, so don't worry, don't freak out. You should be able to make sense of that by the end of our class. The Greek text will be the same in this and in this version, but this is the standard version that people use for translation, and this one is necessary for doing text criticism and the text criticism assignment. So again, if you didn't want to buy both of these, then you could just buy one and then make sure you have access to another one from the library or from borrowing it from someone or so on. But you will have to have access to both of these textbooks. All right. Number 3 on the list. Walter Bauer et al., so there's many editors, A Greek-English Lexicon of the New Testament and Other Early Christian Literature. This is this book here, and I would say that if I was forced to reduce my entire library down to one book besides the Greek and the Hebrew and English Bible, and I could only have one other book, this would be the book I would choose. Now, that probably shows my bias as a New Testament professor. I'd be a little bit limited there. I'd also like to have a Hebrew dictionary. But at least as far as the New Testament is concerned, I would say this is one of the most important tools you can have. This is the standard Greek New Testament dictionary. And you'll notice that it is a bit pricey. And I feel your pain in that price, but it is absolutely worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And you have to have this book to do your homework for this class. So you could borrow one, or you could use one in the library to do your homework, although that might end up causing a bit of competition. I don't know how many copies you have in the library of this book, but I would highly recommend purchasing this book. I'm going to go back and talk more about this book later, this dictionary. Lexicon is just another word for dictionary. Book 4, Richard Young, Intermediate New Testament Greek, A Linguistic and Exegetical Approach. That is this book. And this is our main book for grammatical and syntactical categories. So how do we translate genitives and datives, and how do we translate prepositional phrases and make sense of the different possible nuances of the different prepositions, and conditional sentences, and tense, so present tense and aorist and things like that. All of that is in this textbook, and this one is very important book as well. And this is also, thankfully, not near as expensive. This is also a book that should be of use to you throughout the rest of your life as you use New Testament Greek, because when you're doing sermon preparation, you're translating the text. If you have this book with you, you might not remember all the different categories in this book, but you can always look them up, and then you can be more precise in how you describe what's going on in the text as you do your exegesis. Book 5, Stanley Porter and Andrew Pitts, Fundamentals of New Testament Textual Criticism. That is this book. And this is a book, as I said, that deals with establishing the original text of the New Testament. What did Paul actually write when he sat down with pen and ink and wrote Philippians? Probably a quill, I suppose, not a pen. What did Paul actually write? Well, we don't have the original copy, So what do we do? With some, you throw our hands up in despair and say we can never know. But that's not at all the case. And so discussing textual criticism will help us to see how it is that we can have a New Testament text, and even beyond that, how we can be confident that we have a very solid New Testament text. And so there's a lot of principles involved in making sense of this whole process. There's a lot of principles involved in trying to sort through all the different manuscripts, which sometimes have different different variants in them. So one manuscript might have one word, and another manuscript in that same spot might have accidentally copied that word incorrectly and given us a different word. So which one's the original? Well, text criticism helps us determine that. And so there are principles involved in doing text criticism, and there are physical materials that you need to understand, the different kinds of ancient manuscripts and how we study them, and so on. And so this textbook will be important in figuring that out. And so the Young textbook and the Porter and Pitts textbooks have to be read before we start our class. And I will ask you on the first day of class at the very beginning, I'll make you write down for me what percentage of those textbooks you've read, and that will contribute towards your grade for the class. The next textbook, as you can see, number 6, D.A. Carson, Exegetical Fallacies, 2nd edition. That's this textbook. This one I will let you read by the time of the final exam. You don't have to have read this one before class starts, although I would recommend it. I think you'll find it useful. But you will have to tell me how much of this you've read by the final exam. Finally, there's a chapter, Philippians, pages 498 to 515 in D.A. Carson and Douglas Moo, an introduction to the New Testament, and it's the 2nd edition. That is this book here. And so you don't have to buy the whole book. I know there's a copy in the library, and so you could just photocopy that one chapter and then read that at your leisure. But make sure you have read that Philippians chapter before class starts as well. I will ask you if you've read that as well. And that's going to give you an introduction to questions about date and style and authorship and various things that come up related to the letter to the Philippians, which is the basis for our class. Okay, so you see this note here. All readings except for Carson's Exegetical Fallacies must be completed prior to our first week of class. Exegetical fallacies must be completed prior to the final exam. There are also 7 discourse analysis videos. Discourse analysis is studying how sentences fit together, how paragraphs fit together, and how those make up a whole writing. There are various things that we need to know about broader units of meaning, because no one communicates just on the word level. Isolated words don't mean anything without a context. I mean, they have a bunch of possible meanings, but without a context, they don't mean anything. And so they're situated within individual sentences, but even individual sentences don't mean much apart from how they're related to what comes before and what comes after, and so on. And so these 7 videos will give you an introduction to discourse analysis. And so you'll be required to tell me on the final exam how much of these videos you've watched by Ben Glad, who teaches New Testament at RTS Jackson. So these are Dr. Glad's videos. Assignment. So first of all, translations. Okay. Now I said that a handout will be posted on Canvas. I'm going to change that because I've actually just added it to the syllabus. See below for an explanation of these assignments, which I also discussed in our introductory video, which is what I'm doing right now. All of Philippians, all 4 chapters of Philippians in the Greek must be translated prior to our first week of class. The entire class is going to be working through our translation of Philippians, and discussing our translations. And so I'm going to ask you questions about why did you translate it this way. I'm going to try to weave in the syntactical categories that we see in the Young textbook and weave that into a discussion of our translations and so on. So you have to have the whole translation before the class starts. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a second. There will also be a text criticism assignment. I will discuss this in class. This is not due on the first day of class, and this will simply be due by the time you take the final exam. And I'll go over all of this, but this is going to familiarize you with the textual apparatus in this version of the New Testament, which is called a critical edition of the Greek New Testament. Okay, then the other readings and the discourse analysis videos, and then there will be a final exam. And here's the breakdown for all of that. Translations are worth 30%, text criticism assignment 15%, final exam, which will include vocabulary, very important. I will give you a lengthy section of vocabulary words, and all of those will be taken from the Mounts textbook. So you have to have memorized all words in the Greek New Testament used 30 times and more, which are all of the words that are found at the end of the chapters in the Mounts textbook. That will be a substantial portion of the final exam. The rest of the final exam would be anything from, primarily it would be focused on translations, but it would also possibly include some discussion of syntactical categories from Young and also text criticism issues, things that we'll go over in class. Discourse or course readings and discourse analysis videos, you tell me that you've read these, you certify it in writing that you've read these, and that will be 25% of your grade. All right, well, here's a more detailed discussion of the homework and the readings. Okay, so I'm going to just read through this. By Tuesday, June 11th, 2019, and I guess I probably should say the very beginning of class, you must have translated the entirety of Philippians from Greek into English. And the text that you will use will be the text of the Nestle Aland 28th edition, the NA 28, which is also the exact same text that is found in the UBS 5 Reader's Edition. So the Greek words themselves are identical. You have to have your whole Philippians translation before we start the class. When you're doing translation, you cannot use any helps apart from the Young textbook. I am okay if you use the Young textbook to help you figure out, okay, what's the possible genitive construction that's being used here? I don't really understand it. So you go to Young, because one of the main things I want you to learn in this class is how to use that textbook when you're doing exegesis. And so I'm okay with you using that apart from simply trying to find verses in Philippians in the Young textbook and then copying them down. That would not be appropriate. No helps. That means don't use any English translations. Don't use any commentaries, any other books to tell you how to translate it. And I'm going to require you on the spot in class to translate from Philippians as well, so it's to your advantage to have done this ahead of time. Now, you won't be able to use your translation in class for that. So that's all the more reason to be prepared on this. Now, I want to emphasize this. It's okay if you don't have a perfect written translation. I'm not going to grade you based on how good your translation is at all. I'm going to grade you on whether you did it and whether you actually did it. You know, if it's just random words put there, that's not actually translating. But if there's a translation there, that's what I want you to do, because I want you to struggle through this text, through Philippians. I want you to struggle on your own through Philippians, and then in class, we're going to try to work through Philippians. And so anything you don't understand, hopefully, by the end of the week you will. Also, by Tuesday, June 11th, you must have completed the Young and the Porter and Pitts textbooks, as well as the chapter on Philippians and the Carson and Moo Intro to the New Testament. I've already told you about that. Okay, here, this is really important. Your translation homework is a big part of this course and a part of your grade. So at the very beginning of the week, you're going to hand me your entire translation of Philippians. So it's important that you make a copy. Okay, so photocopy it. Make a copy of your translation, and you can hand me either your actual written translation, or you can hand me the photocopy of your translation. The reason we're going to do this is that I want to make sure you've done it and that you're not just doing it while we're in class. But I do want you to be able to have your copy with you, even though you can't use it if I call on you. The reason to have it with you is that if we're discussing it and we're explaining what's going on in a certain text, you might want to write notes on it, and you might want to write notes to yourself about what was going on, and that would be perfectly fine. So make sure you have a copy with you as well, but make sure you have a copy to hand in to me on the first day of class at the beginning of class. All right, so here's how the assignment works. For every verse in Philippians chapter 1, you must give a gloss and page number from BDAG. That is this book. It's shortened to BDAG because of the names of the editors, Bauer, Arndt, and Gingrich, which is too small, it's somewhere in here, and then Donker. So B, D, and then there's an A and a G for other editors of this book. And so it's just commonly called BDAG. You'll see that in commentaries and things where they just call it BDAG. Okay, so that's what I'm referring to when I refer to BDAG. A gloss is just a simple translation. And these are all of the words that are used 30 times or less in the New Testament. So these are the words that you weren't required to memorize when you memorized the words in Mounts. These are the words that are found in this textbook, and that's why this is so important for doing the homework. Now, I want to show you a picture, again, of that, an instance of that text. And I believe this is from Mark's Gospel, although no, this is from John's Gospel. Okay, so this is John's Gospel, and if you're using this edition to do your homework, you will see all these footnotes, right? So those words that are footnoted, those are the words that you have to give me a gloss from BDAG. Now, this is a gloss, right? Sit is a gloss. But you can't just give me that gloss. You actually have to look the word up in BDAG, in the dictionary. Here's what you do. So this is an example from 1 John 1:1. Okay, in 1 John 1:1, these are the 4 words that are used 30 times or less in the New Testament. So these would be the words that you would have a footnote for in your reader's edition. Right, so you would then write these words down, or you can type them down. In order to type them, you need to go into your settings on your computer and go into your fonts, and you can install the Greek polytonic font. If you have that font, you can write in Greek, and then you can just easily switch it back. I'm not entirely certain how that will work on a non-Apple computer, but you go into settings, and it's usually pretty easy to do, to add a Greek. And then you can use your keyboard. It takes a little bit of getting used to figuring out which keys do what in all of that. And in fact, I can show you something that might be helpful. So this gives you, let's go back to our, so I'll just add this Greek keyboard. So if you go to that website, you can get access to a Greek keyboard. So let me just show you how that works out. Okay. So this shows you. Now I use a Mac, and so this is only for a Mac. But if you do a little searching, you should be able to find this for a non-Mac as well. This is just a guide to which key corresponds to which letter in Greek, and that also is for the different accents, the different accents you can see in the orange and so on. So that's now in the syllabus as well. If you need access to a Greek keyboard because you want to type these out, you don't have to type them out because you can just write them out by hand. That's fine too. So what do? Well, you write akuo down, because in 1 John 1:1, that's one of the words that is used 30 times or less. So you write akuo down, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take the Greek dictionary, the BDAG, and you're going to look it up. What information do I want from you? Well, in the parentheses here, I want you to give me what page number you found it on, and this is the information about the definition itself. So I've got some other pages for you to look at. Okay, this is a photocopy of 2 pages in BDAG, and this is how it works. Aeon, okay, aeon, the Greek word aeon. What does aeon mean? Well, there are several possibilities. The only way to know what a word means is to know how it's being used in context, right? Because words have a certain range of possible meanings. Almost every word does. The word bar in English, right? If I were to ask you, what does bar mean? Well, you could all throw out any number of answers. It's a metal object that you beat someone over the head with. It's a legal licensing agency. It is a place where you go to get alcoholic drinks, and so on. And you could think of, I'm sure, more than just those 3. Well, that's what's called the semantic range of the meaning of the word bar in English. And Greek is no different. All languages are like this. Almost every word has a certain range of meaning. Not every word really does. For instance, ekmalotos here is very limited, at least as it's used in the New Testament. It just means captive, and it appears to be used just one time. Aeon, however, is used frequently in the New Testament, and so it has different possible meanings. And the way that BDAG indicates this is, first of all, with a number here, 1, and then the second possible meaning, 2, and then we keep going down, and then this is a little bit hard to read perhaps over here, 3, 4. So those are the 4 possible meanings of the word aeon in Greek. Now, this is a scholarly dictionary. It doesn't mean that they are infallible. They could be wrong, so you can't treat this as if this is an infallible textbook or an infallible dictionary. But they know a lot more than I do, and they know a lot more than you do about the meaning of words, and so you'd want to have a good reason for assuming that they've missed something. But you also do need to be aware that they're going to have their own biases, and sometimes they might actually exclude meanings for theological reasons. In fact, there are some words that have to do with women in ministry where there's a clear bias against what we call just the position that pastoral ministry is only for men, that only a male can serve in the position of elder in the New Testament. So there's a bit of a bias against that view, and it's actually reflected in the way they translate certain words, like the word head in the New Testament. So they're not infallible, but in general, you're going to find they're very good. And so what do? Well, you've got to decide which one's being, if I see this word, aeon, being used in the New Testament, which one of these definitions do I go with? And the temptation is going to be, well, I kind of already have a preformed notion of what it means, so I'm just going to look until I find that one. But you've just got to think it through. There's no shortcut. This one, so definition 1, a long period of time without reference to beginning or end. Okay. Number 2, a segment of time as a particular unit of history, an age. So Paul often does this. He'll talk about this present age or the present age. And he'll contrast the present age with the age to come. So he's thinking of it as a unit of time. It's something that characterizes this whole time between Christ's first and second coming is the present age. And then the age to come is the new heavens and the new earth. Okay, so that's different than definition 1. Definition 1 is just kind of this unspecified long period of time. And so you can go through here, and what you'll see is various writings referred to. Okay, so this is Hesiod, works and days, theogony. That's what that's referring to. You don't need to know that. If you don't know what one of these writings is, you can go to the front of the dictionary, and there's a listing of the different abbreviations for different writings outside of the New Testament. And so they're giving you various representative instances of this word outside of the New Testament in various Greek writings, including the Greek of the Old Testament here, the Septuagint. Okay, when you get to a bold version, that's when this word aeon is being used in the New Testament. So these here, Luke 170, Acts 2:31, and then they'll often give you like a little a more specialized gloss within this category here of number 1. Now this is where they're doing their own exegesis, right? This is where you can feel much more free to disagree, although it's not the case that you're going to usually disagree necessarily. But they might have placed Luke 170 in the number 1 category. You might read it and think, no, I actually think it's in the category number 2. I think it actually refers to history as a chunk of time, an age. Or maybe I want to place it in category 3, the world as a spatial concept. So that's not even thinking in terms of time, but actually place. So the same word, aeon, can be used in that way. This last one, number 4, is actually more disputed. This is almost acting as if the word aeon in certain instances can refer to spiritual beings themselves, evil spiritual beings that are in opposition to God and God's people. Okay, well, the only way to know how a word is being used is to look at the context and think through what makes most sense in the context. And that just requires you to have reasons, right? Be able to think through what reason would I go for definition 1 versus definition 2. Often this is going to be clear. Often this isn't actually going to be that hard to figure out. This present age is, you know that's not referring to the world as a place so much. Okay, but within these definitions, number 1, you also have what you could call a kind of sub-definition, and that's indicated here by A with a circle around it, B with a circle around it. So that's 1A or 1B. Okay, so that's what I've done over here. With akuo in 1 John 1:1, I went to page, I looked it up and found that it was on page 37, so I wrote that down. And I decided that I thought that it was definition 1, subpoint B, so that would be 1B. Of course, this is a different word, it's not aeon. And then there's even a third category sometimes. So you don't see that here, but I have another file I want you to look at. This is another page from BDAG. Okay, and I use this one just because it gives more subcategories. Agathos. I know this is probably a little bit hard to read, but agathos typically means good. Okay, so definition 1A, useful, beneficial. Definition 1B, used as a pure substantive, so with an article, the good. That would be saying, someone could say something like, if you know the good and you don't do it. Paul says something like that. But within that 1b, there's also 1b alpha, and 1b beta, and 1b gamma. And so they'll go through, for certain words, especially prepositions, they might go through all the letters of the Greek alphabet, and then they'll even start going into Hebrew letters, because there's so many possible glosses. Okay, so there's 3 levels of glosses. There's the black circle, which is the more basic. Then there's a sub-level, A, B, and so on. And then there's a third level, alpha, beta, gamma. So if you were looking up the word agathos, and in one of your verses, and you decided that it was 1b, then you'd write that down, 1b. But then maybe you thought, you'd have to decide, is it 1b alpha, beta, or gamma? Those are just Greek letters. And let's say you chose 1b alpha, like I've done here with this other word, akuo. 1b alpha. Those are the things you write down for me. So you write down the page number in the dictionary, BDAG, so BDAG, and it's page 37, and then you write down the specific definition that you think best fits, the level that best fits, 1b alpha. Not everyone's going to have this third level. And in fact, some of them will not even have the second level. They'll just have the first level. Some of them, as you can see, with a word like ekmalatos, don't have any levels, because it's just obviously one possibility, captive. Okay, so I've given you 4 examples from 1 John 1:1, where you've got to give me this for everything. So you're going to do this for every single word in Philippians 1 that is used 30 times or less. So that's going to be every one of the words that is in the footnotes for Philippians chapter 1. This is the information I want from the Greek dictionary. And then you give me not this gloss, but you give me the gloss that you have chosen in BDAG. Okay, now with this third one here, theaomai, I disagreed with BDAG. So BDAG said it was 1a, and I actually thought it was the third definition, BDAG 3. That's fine if you do that. BDAG might actually have in bold, like that, Acts 15:18. They might have placed Acts 15:18 here. You might read Acts 15:18 and think, no, Acts 15:18 should go in 2. And so if you were doing this homework, you would write down instead, you'd write BDAG 2, and then A, and then alpha, if you disagreed with BDAG. So it's okay for you to disagree with BDAG. Okay, so Philippians 1, the first chapter of Philippians, every word that is used 30 times or less, which is found in the reader's New Testament, you will write the word down in Greek or type it. You'll give me the gloss that you have chosen. Gloss is the definition. You'll write down BDAG, and then you'll give me the specific number and sub-numbers and letters for the definition you've chosen, and you'll give me the page number in BDAG. Every single word 30 times or less. Not every word in Philippians 1, just every word 30 times or less. All right, for every verse in Philippians 1 to 2, so chapters 1 and 2, not just chapter 1, you must parse all verbals, and that includes verbs and participles. And I will ask you in class to translate verbs and participles too. So what are you doing there if you need a refresher? You are going to look through every single verse that you're translating, and you're going to make sure you can identify all of the verbs, and you are going to make sure that you can tell me the information of the parsing, right? So the tense, the voice, and the mood, and the person, and the number for verbals. If it is a participle, then you would give me the tense, the mood, and the fact that it's participle, and then you would give me case, gender, and number. If you need a refresher in how to do parsing, then go back to Mounts and look up how to parse, and he has an explanation of that. Maybe I could just find an example here that might be useful. So we've got the word Aiden. What is Aiden? So Aiden is an aorist active indicative, third person singular, and it is from the word horao originally, which is to see, and that's the information you give me if you're parsing. So aorist active indicative, third person singular, from horao, and it means to see. Then for every verse, also in Philippians 1-2, you must give me the case, gender, number of all nouns and adjectives, etc. So if you were going to go and find a noun or an adjective, right? So hoi mathatai, right here. Hoi mathatai. What is the case, gender, and number of that noun? Well, it is nominative, masculine, plural, right? The disciples. Nominative, masculine, plural. So the way this looks, as far as parsing is, if it was an aorist active indicative, you would say aorist active indicative, third person singular, and for that one that I was giving you, Aiden, it would be horao as the lexical form. So that's the information you give me when you parse. If you are going to give me a noun like that one I just showed you, nominative, masculine, plural. Oops, I'm doing it in Greek still. Nominative, masculine, plural. So nominative, masculine, plural. And this one is aorist, active, indicative, third person singular. Okay. So you do that for every noun or adjective in Philippians 1 and 2. And I'll ask you about these in class as well. And all of this parsing and all of these case, gender, number, you have to give me that as well at the very beginning of class. For Philippians 3-4, you just translate. You don't have to do the BDAG information, you don't have to do the parsings, and you don't have to do the case, gender, and number for those. There are a variety of ways that you could approach writing out your translation. You could simply just use pen and ink, and you could write your English translation, and then you could write your parsing, your case, gender, number, and your dictionary information. Or some have found that going to a site like this one, which is BibleHub.com, it allows you to search the Greek text in very easily, and then it gives you the Greek text here, and so you can actually just go in. Now, one thing you'll have to do, this is the Nestle Aland, this is the edition of 1904, so that's not the current edition. So if you were using this edition, you would have to make sure that the words are all the same. So you'd have to compare this to Philippians 1. So I've got Philippians 1 open. You obviously can't see this, but I've got Philippians 1 open in front of me as well from the current edition, and I'm scanning through, and I see that there are no differences between the current edition and the 1904 edition of Nestle. And so what you could do then is you could just cut and paste, take that and put that into a Word file if you wanted, and then you could give me your translation underneath. Paul and Timothy, servants of Christ Jesus, to all the saints, or that doesn't always help us anymore because it's a word that's just has this aura of being, holy people. To all those sanctified, you could even say, or set apart in Christ Jesus. And this is an apposition construction. So to those who are sanctified in Christ Jesus, namely those who are in among the Philippians. So to those who are sanctified in Christ Jesus, who are in, who are, I guess you could say, among the Philippians, with the elders and deacons. Okay, so there's your translation. And then, since this is in Philippians 1, you would give me, and I don't have the BDAG here in front of me, but you would then look up words that are used 30 times or less. Well, there's 2 words in this text that are used 30 times or less. Episkopois and diakonos. Okay, so you would either do this or type it out in Greek or write it out in English, and you would give me the case, gender, number, since these are nouns, so dative, masculine, plural. Dative, masculine, plural. If there were verbs that that were used 30 times or less, then you would give me the parsing for those verbs. Here we have a participle, even though this is not used 30 times or less. This is the verb to be. And so then you would give me that parsing information. So present active participle, dative masculine plural, from the root a me, and that would be your parsing if you had to parse that verb, which in this instance you don't actually have to parse. And as I said, I don't have BDAG in front of me, but let's just pretend. Let's say we looked up BDAG and we found that it was BDAG definition 2B, and then it was gamma. So 2B gamma. And then just pretending here, I have no idea where this is in BDAG. Let's say, okay, so the words that are used 30 times or less, so it's going to be episkopois that we do this for, and then you'd also do the same for diakonos, this word here. So let's just pretend it's found on page 236. Okay, that's the information then that you would be giving me in your translation homework. And you do the same for diakonos, since it is also used 30 times or less. In this instance, I just was pretending this was used 30 times or less, but AME, of course, is much more common than that. Okay, so you see, you give me the case, gender, number if it's a noun, used 30 times or less. You give me the parsing if it's a verb or a verbal like a participle, used 30 times or less. I think that's about it for this. Yeah, I don't really think there is any more information to give you. So you've got this video. If you need to go back and re-listen to this, that's fine. You might find that useful. And just want to say I'm really looking forward to getting back down to Houston and either meeting you or seeing old faces that I've met before. And I think we're going to really have a fun time diving into God's Word and really getting into the details of the Greek of Philippians. So look forward to seeing you all. All right, goodbye.